Hi everybody, Dave here. I've got a very special guest today. Her name's Sherrilyn. How are you?
Good, thanks.
We're going to talk a little bit about her story. I just want to say a quick prayer before we start that. Father, thank you for who you are, and thank you that you have a story, that each one of our lives is a story, and it's a story of you bringing restoration and healing and hope and drawing us to you. And we thank you for what you do, and we thank you that you're in the nitty-gritty with us in our lives. And we dedicate this time to you, and we pray, Lord, that you would open the hearts and minds of people listening to our conversation today, and that you would be able to move in and pinpoint these areas of their own lives that maybe they need to deal with. We give you this time in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
So, Sherrilyn, let's start at the beginning. So you were born in a Christian family. You grew up on a farm, and you were one of five kids. Fourth of five. Fourth of five. So you had a brother below you, younger?
Yes, younger brother, and then there was three older than me.
Yeah. So was it a Christian family?
Yes, so we were all Christians.
Yeah.
Went to church religiously.
Yeah.
Even drove like 25 minutes north every Sunday to go to our little church, because being on a farm we were quite remote.
Yes.
Out in the rural area.
Yeah.
Had lots of friends, people would come around, but some of that was limited to the weekends because, again, we had to travel for school as well by bus.
Yes.
So, we were really sort of out in the country, in the what-wops, in New Zealand.
Yeah. In your early years, do you feel like you had a relationship with God, or was it largely just going to church with your folks and family?
Yeah, it just seemed natural progression for me. At about 6, I remember asking Jesus into my life and being really happy about that, and telling Mum while I was sitting on her lap. Yeah. And then there was a stage, maybe a couple of years later, where I was angry with God as a child, maybe 7 or 8. Yeah. And told him to get lost, and and then being really sad about that, and but also at a really early age too, despite the type of church that we went to that didn't really believe in it, I also spoke in tongues, even though that wasn't something that my church denomination believed in at the time. Wow. But it was just something that seemed to be quite natural.
Was that something that your parents did as well?
No.
It was just you?
It was just me.
So how did you, in your mind, how did you deal with this? Because you wouldn't have had much information about it or anything. Do you think you were a bit weird, or...?
No, I didn't. I just didn't quite believe, maybe until much later, and that's another story of how God showed me how real it was.
So did you think that you were talking in an alien language, or how did your mind process it at that time? Because you didn't have anything to go on.
No, that's right.
Wow, it's amazing.
Yeah. I just, as a childlike faith, I just would use it, and
it just naturally came out of you. Do you remember the first time you spoke in tongues?
In my bedroom, just talking to God at night. Yeah. And just starting to use it.
So the language would flip between English and tongues.
Yeah.
Do you only have one language?
Yes.
In tongues?
Yes.
Because I've met people that have different languages depending on the scenario, or it depends on the kind of prayer that they were in.
Yeah. No,
have you ever known what you were saying?
Wasn't until I was much older.
Okay.
And that was the way that God showed me that actually it was real, because I was asked in front of a whole lot of people to speak in tongues. Wow. And I was the first one that had to say it, and I felt like...
It's a big thing to do in front of people, right?
Because again, I wasn't quite sure, because of my background, church background, I wasn't quite sure whether it was a real thing or not. So at the time when I was asked that, I just wanted to dig a hole and bury myself. I was... really unsure, and it was scary. Yeah. But
How old would you have been at this time?
Oh, in my 20s.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah, so much later.
Yeah.
Anyway, so someone else in their room had a gift of interpretation. Yes. And so they were asked to interpret. Yeah. We were basically paired off, and he interpreted mine. And it was at that point that I just cried.
Yeah.
Because what he had said was not... I didn't know verbally exactly word for word what I was saying, but I could sense in my spirit what it was that I was saying to God. And so it matched, and I just cried because that was God's way of saying, yep, what you've got is real. And so just go for it.
So this idea of a child of 7 years old speaking in tongues, and at that stage you hadn't been water baptised?
No.
And there was no other manifestation of the Holy Spirit in terms of a baptism in the Holy Spirit at that time to you?
No, that didn't happen until later.
Yeah. It breaks through a bunch of theology, which is something that we could discuss at a later date maybe, but it's good, I love it. I love that God breaks through our human mould sometimes, but it's amazing that you stuck with it because... Oh, I guess your family didn't really hear you because this was at nighttime prayers, eh? So you were in your bedroom at night speaking to God, whispering tongues.
Yeah. So it wasn't really a public thing, it was just between me and God. Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I had a really close relationship with God all the way through my life. And we would talk, chat like friends. Even, just going to the bathroom saying, oh, Lord, what am I, what am I doing? Or just talking to him as if he was there.
Yeah.
And that was just something that just happened naturally. And I am thankful for my Christian background and the churches that we went to because of the Bible base and all the verses that I learned. Because I fully believe, be transformed by the renewal of your mind, and to be able to be strong in your mind about what God believes enables you to, have a really good foundation in which to build your life on. So
I guess in terms of theology, you wouldn't have been at that age where you would have come across, say, 1 Corinthians, where it talks about speaking in tongues as a gift from God. That would have happened later, eh? Because it would have challenged everything that was going on in your family's church, wouldn't it?
Definitely, yeah. It was sort of put under the carpet.
Yeah.
Like, okay, no, that was something for the time of Acts.
Yes.
And it's not for today. Which is what I was told, and so when I had that amazing thing that happened in my 20s, that God was able to say, no, actually this is for real. I had to look at my whole life. Like, okay, I've been taught some stuff that's not right. Then I needed
the church.
I needed to do my own study, so that started a whole sort of study.
So your family were brought up in a open Brethren church. Interesting. So you come through into your early teens, and you were a Christian. You had this lovely, natural, personal relationship with God at that time. Was there anything in your early teens that kind of affected your life, or? Yeah,
a huge upheaval. When I was 14, I was raped by a person that the family knew. And because I all that time thought it was my fault, it was a secret, and it was a huge secret to try and keep. Didn't tell anybody, although as near the beginning stages, my closest girlfriend, she knew something was up, and especially as I was crying all the time at high school. I remember being on the field, sitting on the field at lunchtime in the sun, and she was there, and we were just... I don't know whether she said anything, but she was just there.
So she kept your secret like a loyal friend would, because you said don't tell anyone. Because I truly believed that it was my fault. And the shame that goes with that is just enormous. And I felt that after it happened, surely people can see it on me. Like, surely I must be giving it away. Like, I just feel dirty, I feel bad, therefore I must look bad, like, surely. But no one knew. And so, and it was, because of the shame and because of the guilt, which happens to so many people when this type, these type of events happen to them, and it's just not true. It's not their fault. But I didn't know that at the time. So apart from your friend, did you tell anyone else? You tell your parents?
So I didn't tell my parents for a long time. Because my dad was an elder in the church, I felt that, well, I was a good girl, and so therefore I didn't want him to, and his name to be tarnished, or him to be removed from his position as elder. I didn't want anything to affect our family because of what I thought my fault. It was my fault in being there at the time. I shouldn't have been there. And so I didn't tell anyone for ages, but I remember one particular night, about 2 o'clock in the morning, crying and just feeling like, okay, I actually have to tell somebody. So I knocked on their door and got Mum, and she obviously consoled me and wanted to know what had happened. So we had a brief chat, and then decided to talk more about it in the morning after trying to get some sleep. But then the decision was made to not tell Dad, because we thought that it would break him. And, you know, I don't hold grudges against my mum for that, because I don't know whether she knew what to do at the time. But if I was going to be in that same position, or as a parent, I would make sure that I'm not rescuing anybody else and not getting the child to have to hold on to that, because it was almost like you have to contain that secret still.
Yes.
And when something is a secret, it has power.
Yes.
But when we can break that secretiveness, then we break the power that it has over us.
And the fact that you can talk about it with me means that that power is broken. Though you always hold things, you know, with our life, we just do, don't we?
Yeah, yeah.
These things become a part of us,
yes.
whether we want them to or not, but we need to, I don't know, break that power, and the voice is the way to do it, isn't it?
Yeah, there's something about declaring. As soon as you put something out there and declare it, you know, you've let it go.
Yes.
It's just lost its power.
Did you ever have any reconciliation with that person? Did they ever ask for forgiveness or anything like that?
No, so I, through help of counsellors, I would do things like writing therapy, or obviously talking to them, talking therapy. The more you talk about it, the less powerful and horrible it gets. And also they were able to align my thinking correctly, and that it wasn't my fault, and then look at my thinking, and I was able to look at my thinking, and because there was a lot of thinking that was unhealthy that came from that, which held me. Yes.
So your teenage years were quite sad.
Yeah, they were quite sad.
Quite broken.
Yeah, I remember lots of crying, lots of secrecy.
Yeah.
Lots of, and one particular time lying on the floor in someone's house that I was, as a later teen, boarding with, and just all the blinds were pulled and it was dark and I was crying and even wanting to end it all. And even though I had God, and I'll, you know, later on can chat about the role that He played, but at that point it was me just talking to Him and writing, doing lots of writing, but yeah.
So did you keep a diary through this whole time?
Yes.
So that was quite good therapy for you, because you could get it out even if you couldn't say it?
Definitely, yeah. And just being able to see those words on paper is also really powerful, because you think, wow, did that actually come from me? Especially if you're reading it later on.
Have you still got those diaries? Have you gone back over? Yeah. So in terms of part of your healing journey, was it good to actually have that writing?
Yeah, definitely.
In that teenage voice?
Yes, yeah.
Interesting.
Because I had no other outlet of... I mean, I didn't see a counsellor until I was 21.
Right.
So from 14 to 21, that's a long time.
You were dealing with this, and so because it wasn't dealt with, it was always at day one in a sense, wasn't it?
So looking into those words now, I just go, wow, there was a whole lot going on there that thankfully I had. I don't know even where I got the idea from, but I had the idea to write things down, because if I didn't get it out...
Do you still journal?
Yes, I do, but
so
not
you
as much
journaled
as...
fairly consistently through that whole period into your 30s, 40s?
During that time, 14 to 21, or around those areas, I journaled a lot, almost like daily. Now I'm not so much, but I still, every now and then,
I could see that being a book.
Yeah, yeah.
Just your journals.
Yeah.
Here it is.
Yeah. That's
Be an interesting book to read.
That would be very interesting. Yeah.
Diary of Sherrilyn.
Not Diary of the Wimpy Kid.
No, not Diary of the Wimpy Kid.
Yeah.
Diary of the Sad Kid.
Yeah, yeah.
Was there any other behaviours or anything else that came out as a result of what happened to you?
Yeah. So because it was all so secret, I had to try and cope somehow. And the only coping I knew was comfort of food. And I developed this eating disorder. At first it started off as a like anorexic behaviour, where I tried to limit food intake to minimal, and so even an apple I would feel guilty for eating. Like I feel like I set these expectations, and then if I ate an apple I'd feel really bad for eating it because I feel like I'd blown it, that I'd eaten too much. Every time the scale went up by just a pound or whatever, I would feel enormous self-hate, enormous guilt. The scales had a huge control over me. That's
an interesting point. So did you have a daily ritual, or was it sometimes even many times a day you were on the scales?
Yeah, it might be twice a day, it might be more.
Wow.
But for me to not weigh myself was too hard. You know,
couldn't cope.
The draw to have to go and weigh myself was just so strong.
Isn't that fascinating that a device like that is a household item, it's like an altar
it
almost.
Had so much power.
Yes.
So much power, and yet it was a scales, you know, as an object.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So I started this, what started off as anorexia, but then I couldn't keep it up because I just couldn't. And so I started what was called bulimia, where I might go for long periods of time, you know, a day, maybe a day and a bit, and I hadn't eaten anything, and I'd feel really good because I was achieving my goal.
Yeah.
And then I'd go and blow it because I might start off with one little biscuit, which would then lead into the whole packet.
Yeah.
And then you feel like you've completely blown it.
Yeah.
And, oh well, you may as well just let loose and have it all. So then there was tubs of ice creams or chips or whatever it is.
Yes.
I mean, I would consume a hang of a lot. And then, of course, you would feel terrible. So it was like this vicious cycle.
Yeah.
You just couldn't get out of it. So the only way to make myself feel better was to purge it. And then I get my control back.
Yes.
Because I felt that what had happened to me was out of control.
Yes.
So I needed to get control back.
Yes.
And because I felt so bad and so dirty and just ugly, I wanted to try and make myself perfect, which would then mean that I might feel good about myself because I'm looking good, therefore I'll feel good. So it's a whole psychological game. And I've forgotten what you'd asked me now.
No, that's good. Through that time, did you have boyfriends or anything like that? How did you deal with the whole boy thing? Having had this trauma, how did you approach guys, or did you just stay away from guys? But then you wanted the adulation, right? You were doing all of this work to look perfect. You wanted someone to say, you look good, you look perfect. Is that a thing, or for you? How did that play out for you in your teenage years?
Well, actually, that's a really sad question because I did have a boyfriend at the time. Wasn't so serious or anything, you know, it would just be a pecking on the cheek sort of thing and spending time together and maybe holding hands. It was very innocent. My boyfriend at the time noticed a difference in me, but I didn't tell him until quite a while down the track what had happened. Anyway, that's a sad story because
couldn't cope.
He couldn't cope,
and
so he left and didn't want to have anything to do with me. In fact, no, I won't go there. He said some not very nice things. So then,
which kind of reinforced your bad feelings about yourself at that time.
That's right. Yeah. And so But so I didn't have really anything to do with any other boyfriends for, and into my 20s. Yeah.
So with the eating disorder, obviously it was all born out of this action, this event. There are parents with children that are going through this kind of thing at the moment. Is there any advice that you could give parents in terms of looking at their kids and trying to get help for them? It's a cycle that ties your mind up that can be very, very hard to break, right?
Yeah.
When you move through, so all of your teenage years, effectively, how long were you binging and purging for? How old were you?
So 14 through to 21. Yeah.
Wow.
So a long time.
Yeah, and there must have been physical damage because of that. Your parents didn't know?
No, so I was pretty good at keeping a secret.
Wow. When did you tell your mum? How old were you?
Probably about 18.
18, so 4 years.
Yeah, but then I told her about what had happened, but I didn't tell her about my bulimia.
Oh, okay.
So I still managed to keep that from her.
Yeah.
It wasn't until my sister came back from one of her times at university and she noticed there was a big change in my weight and knew, like, whoa, it was really obvious because the period of which she was away, let's say March through till November, a lot had happened, and so she noticed and probably had a discussion with Mum then, but I don't know whether Mum didn't know quite what to do, and so therefore it was never really talked about. I think what actually just reminded me, she probably more went into trying to control me and make me eat, whereas I didn't want to. That's probably the worst thing that you can try and do.
She probably wouldn't have had much experience on the bulimia side of things, so was there a lock on the fridge? She wasn't that aware, right?
No, she wasn't aware. So I had a teenage brother who ate a lot, so we just probably blame him.
Yeah.
And I don't know why they wouldn't have noticed, but there was a lot of food that was going on, and I managed to develop strategies, sneaky strategies. So, for instance, if you were purging in the bathroom, I'd turn the shower on at the same time, or I might flush the toilet, or you get so good at it that you're able to do it without too much noise, and then you'd apply a bit of makeup where you had any red blotches and things, to hide the red marks after you've purged. But then I got really good at what order I would eat my food in, and then how much water should I consume at the same time in order to be able to purge easily. Like meat obviously is a lot harder to purge, so therefore that would be eaten last. You eat the vegetables and
you didn't become vegetarian as a result of this?
Because I couldn't get away with not eating food, because as a family we had a tradition where we would eat at the table together, and if I didn't turn up for food or didn't eat most of what was on my plate, then questions would be asked, and I didn't want any questions to be asked. So I wanted to remain as normal looking as possible. There was a lot of secret behaviour.
It's amazing that all of this can go on under the roof of people that are Christian and caring for their child, and it blows me away, really, that a lot of this wasn't spotted.
There's a lot of hiding as well, like even the clothes that you wear, baggy. I didn't want to be in any photos, even wearing a bathing costume, I wouldn't. There was a whole lot of stuff that I was able to hide. And this is the thing, it was a secret, and when it's really secretive, it's hard.
So moving through into your late teens, early 20s, you obviously had told your mum, so at least the secret was out in partial form. How did that play out into your 20s?
So when I was 20, before I no, let's go back a wee bit. Mum and Dad were doing a counselling course, believe it or not.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I don't even know through which place or whatever. But anyway, on the coffee table was a magazine that would come out once a semester, so maybe 3 times a year. And on this particular magazine, it had eating disorders on the front cover. And then it had an article about it within it. And I remember that being a huge turning point for me, because I obviously wanted to read what it had in there. I didn't know what it was that I had, but through reading this article, I was able to go, oh, that's me. So I was able to actually see that this happens to a lot of people. It's not just me. That's not just a problem with me. This is actually a thing that a lot of people have. Therefore, if this person has been helped by it, then I can. And it started me looking for help and looking for, okay, if other people have managed to get help through this and it's a disease of the mind, as they said, then I need to try and do something about it, because I wanted, I was a singer and music was my thing, and I did lots of items, and I knew that I would damage my vocal cords. I knew that I would cause, if I kept on doing it, I would have severe consequences of, didn't want that to happen. So therefore that was one of the motivations for me trying to get help and change things. So that's when I looked at getting a counsellor. I hadn't had any counselling up until that point. Another friend also was able to come beside me and say, hey, you know, what you're doing, because she managed to see, discover what I was doing.
Pick it up.
Yeah, she picked it up. Then she said, you know, what you're doing is going to cause this, this and this and this. And because I didn't want that to happen, again, that was another motivation for me.
That's interesting in terms of somebody else having the presence of mind or discernment to actually pick up on this kind of thing.
Yeah. So so that was my turning point, really. And that's when I really wanted to do something about it, because if you don't realise you've got a problem, you're not going to do anything about it. And so that's when I realised I had a problem.
So you started down the road of counselling. So was this somebody, did you look it up in the white pages, or how did you find somebody that you could work with?
Yeah, it's interesting how that worked. I was actually working for a radio station. Yeah. And part of my job was interviewing people. And one of the people that I had to interview was a counsellor in eating disorders.
Oh,
and
wow.
So I had to come up with questions for her. And
that's amazing.
Yeah, so she was plonked in my lap, so to speak.
Wow.
So then afterwards I contacted her and said, would you mind if I came to you for a few sessions, because I think I've got, you know, an issue that I need to be dealing with. So that's when the whole counselling started. Yeah. But going back to my relationship with God, I haven't mentioned much about him, but he was definitely there all this time. And as I said to you, I would write as if I was writing letters to him. And I would be able to hear as well some things that he would be saying to me, but it probably didn't do so much listening in that time. It was more like me just regurgitating. But after I read that article that was sitting on the coffee table, that I think God had planted pretty much there, and realised that I had a problem and what it was called, and I started to research it, then I also started to ask God for help. Okay, how do I get over this thing then? Because I didn't want to have it anymore. Yeah. And so he gave me ideas to divide up my day. So because I would feel so guilty, because I was completely turned around about what was normal eating routine.
Yeah, right.
Like I didn't actually try to eat anything. Like And then when you did, it was all blown out of proportion,
Yeah.
you know. So therefore, I needed to have some normality and some routine, and God was telling me I needed to divide my day up into 3.
But right. So you had some direction there. That's fascinating.
Yeah, and that I was very much I like stickers and colours and
Yes.
crafty, arty person.
Yeah.
So therefore, God said, get some stickers and reward yourself for every one of those segments in your day where you've had a good day. So good might be that you've actually had something
Yes.
normal to eat,
Yes.
that you haven't purged, that, you know, all the things that were correct way to do it, and you'd give yourself a sticker. And if you manage to get 3 stickers in a day, then woohoo to you. But initially it took me a while to get more than just one.
So the Holy Spirit was teaching you to change your mindset a little bit.
So he was really practical at that point. So that enabled me to try and get back into a routine and rewarding myself for, rather than skewed behaviour, rewarding myself for the right way to think and the right way to behave and act. Yeah.
Overcoming this, obviously the counsellor, you know, you started to deal with the root causes of things and the mindset that it wasn't your fault and started to be released from that side of things. Did the eating behaviour change naturally when you started dealing with that original event, or did they have to be dealt with as separate entities? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've seen more than one counsellor. So I had some counselling sessions with that person at that time, and then there was a big break, and then I knew that I needed to go and see a counsellor again. So that's when we started to get more into the nitty-gritty of like what had actually happened to cause the whole thing, and into my thinking. And sadly, one of the types of thinking that you have is mental filtering, where you're focusing on one thing that you've done wrong and completely leaving out all the good things that you've done, or you're thinking that it's your fault entirely, where actually you're not taking into consideration everything else that was happening at the time, or other people that had parts to play in what had happened. And so I was able to basically realign my thinking into the right way of looking at who else had a part to play in this. And
was this was the counselling it was like, it wasn't Christian counselling, it was just a standard style of counselling?
No, it was Christian counselling for both of them.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think that side of things, do you think the Christian element helped, or could this have happened with any style of counselling?
Well, I believe that we are people of mental, physical, emotional and spiritual. And if you don't deal with all 4 of those aspects of us as a complete whole person, then you're not really dealing with the whole package. And so I believe, because of my spiritual belief in my relationship with Jesus, that I needed to deal with the spiritual, because it was just so important. So therefore I chose Christian counsellors. I think that yes, you can definitely get help with any other counsellor who's not a Christian. I just think, like, take those steps no matter what it is. But for me personally, I found it important to be able to find somebody who believed in God as well, and that was able to deal with the spiritual side of things.
You've the shoe's on the other foot in a sense, because you've started to become down the road of becoming a counsellor, accredited counsellor yourself.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so I've done it part-time, 4 years, and I've got 1 more year to go. Yeah.
Wow. And that is you've covered Christian and non-Christian elements with different courses and amazing. Do you still get counselling for yourself?
That's part of the requirements for doing this degree.
Right.
That you get counselling, because obviously you want to be dealing with all your secrets and all your little rooms of you as a person, so that you're trying to be as close to being whole as possible.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I say that laughing because we're all on a journey. I mean, we'll never reach perfection at all. And And even as things come up, as I'm finding, as I'm doing my studies, there are things that come up that I realise, oh, okay, I need to look at that type of thinking, it's not healthy.
Yes.
Or I need to deal with that particular thing that happened in my life. Because when things are subconscious, you don't realise what's there until it's brought to the surface.
Yeah.
And God can do that, which is really amazing.
Yes.
And through my studies, things have been brought to the surface that I didn't really realise that were there. So, yeah.
Would you say that it would be a good idea for every person to have some counselling sessions, even if there's nothing specifically sitting in your brain as an issue?
Yeah, totally.
Maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a bit like cleaning up your house.
Yes.
You know, you don't realise what's there until someone shows you the dirt, you know. And I think if you are open enough to lay it all out there and say, here, you know, help, you know, what do I need to deal with, then God can help you.
It can be a hard thing to find somebody you trust enough within Christian circles who may not be a counsellor, but somebody on equal footing or equal terms that you can trust to share things with. It brings to mind that verse, confess your sins to one another that you may be healed. You know, there's an element of that confession for a healing that the Bible talks about, and also the renewing of our minds, that transformation, that renewing that should happen, that God can help with if you let him.
That's right.
So you move into your 20s, this whole journey kind of blows open a little bit because of the counselling, but you begin to get your eating in control. How long did it take from that time where you started stickering yourself, giving and started to change your mindset? How long did it take for your eating not to be an issue anymore? Or is that something that you live with, that you have to deal with the rest of your life? I don't know.
It's a gradual thing, because you're going to have slip-ups.
Yeah.
And then you can't beat yourself over the head for those slip-ups. And sometimes it took a long time to pull myself up and start again.
It's like any addiction, right?
Yeah, any addiction. And sadly, because you've got a fridge in front of you every day, and food you're confronted with every day, it's something really hard.
And we need
to
it for sustenance as well.
That's right.
So it's a real hard one.
Yeah, because it's that whole balancing act, trying to put it in perspective and keep it healthy, and not let it go down the unhealthy track.
Yeah.
So it took to answer your question, it was probably about another 4 or so years before I felt
it's a long time, eh?
It's a long time. But I believe probably within the first year, I made a decision to stop purging. I just had to. So there were a few slip-ups in that year, but ultimately that was the first thing that changed, was making my decision that I needed to change and stop doing that.
So did that mean that you had to be a lot more strict with your eating again?
Oh, it was so hard.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you felt a little bit full, or a little bit...
that natural behaviour would take you to the bathroom.
Yeah, or you're feeling sad, or, where times I'd used food as a comfort.
Yeah, that's a big thing.
It was a huge thing. So I might be feeling this horrible feeling, but I knew I had made the decision I didn't want to purge, so therefore I had to just deal with it. Just sit there with it, even though I felt horrible. Yeah. So that took a while. Yeah, that took a long while to get over that.
This is a bit of an aside question.
Yeah.
With your counselling, or with this program to come right, was there any prayer in terms of spiritual entities? Like, Christians, a lot of Christians believe in the demonic realm, and that trauma can introduce things into your life that need to be dealt with spiritually. Was that part of your journey at all, or not?
Definitely. So you're probably aware of soul ties.
Yes.
So my counsellor was able to pray over that and have soul ties broken, any strongholds broken.
Yes. Did you notice any differences after those prayers or those times, or not?
Yeah, I especially noticed a big difference after having things like, religious spirit broken off me, because I'd sort of probably been brought up in a Brethren church. Was quite a lot of religious spirit going on, but also what I'd created in myself through my perfectionism.
Yes.
Those things, they needed to be broken off. And when I had those prayed for...
When you're showing a good face, when there's that...
Yeah.
The inside versus the outside, that two-facedness...
Yes.
Religion is there, right?
Yes.
It's an ism.
Yes, yeah. And being very religious with, do not do this and do not do that, with my eating though. So when that was broken off, I did notice it, a lot more ease in being able to step in the right direction, move in the right direction with my eating, and not so much guilt and not so much shame and not so much power drawn to wanting to purge or wanting to control my eating.
Stand on the scales.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you came through, and obviously part of your journey has been with your husband in terms of healing for you, and how he has dealt with this information when you shared it with him when you were early in your dating, I guess. Is there anything that you could say to, say, a guy who has a lady, confront him with the truth of her life like this? Because you mentioned to me off camera that you'd had a boyfriend and you'd told him, and that didn't turn out so well. He couldn't deal. But obviously, how long have you been married?
27 years.
27 years. Whoa.
Yeah, it's a long time.
Yeah, that makes you about 35 now.
Yeah, that's right. 36. Yeah.
So that's obviously been a part of your relationship with him, and your kids know about your history, I'm assuming. Maybe first family, not so much second family as yet because of their ages, but that's a big thing for everybody. So how would you suggest somebody in the role in a relationship, say you're going out with somebody or even married to somebody before you find this information, what would you say would be a good response to a truth like this?
Well, firstly, to believe them.
Yeah.
To validate how they're feeling.
Yeah.
Because if you have spent years believing that it's been your fault, and then now you're trying to, with the help of a counsellor, realign your thinking, just by being believed and having your feelings validated can be huge. And then
to still have that person stick there with you.
Yeah, definitely. And I believe I've got a very special husband.
Yeah.
And he's been a lot, I can contribute a lot of my healing and help through him.
Right.
And how he loved me unconditionally.
Yeah. And
I didn't have to look amazing, or didn't have to look, although he would probably say I am. And, he didn't set certain expectations. He just loved me no matter what. And because of that, that unconditional love, that's been a lot of my healing.
You have a rock there.
I have a rock. And he's a very good listener, and he's also very wise. If I ask him what I look like in this, he says a very wise response. Yeah. But no, he's always been encouraging.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I felt like I've been able to talk to him about anything.
Yeah.
And so to be able to have such great communication and open communication about anything,
yes,
no matter what, and no judgment, then that's been fantastic.
Yeah. It's been an amazing conversation. If you could talk to your younger self, if you could talk, say we'll go to your 14 or 15-year-old self, knowing what you know now, is there anything that you could say to that 14 or 15-year-old self that would have helped in this journey?
It's interesting, you're almost playing the role of my counsellor, because that's one of the things that we had to do in the counselling sessions was to write a letter to my younger self and say, you know, as what I know now, what I would say to them. And I think the biggest thing would be that it's not your fault. None of it was your fault. And that we love you so much. And that you're beautiful. Yeah, and just being there for you. Not to set so many high expectations on yourself, but to actually share it with somebody that you can trust. Find somebody as quick as you can to be able to talk to about it. Don't hold it as a secret. And
trust that your parents can deal with this.
Yeah, and trust that your parents can deal with it.
Both parents.
Exactly. And work at it together. I think if you can become a team in doing it and getting help, that'd be great. But then obviously the parents need to be treading really carefully with that, because you don't want to send it further down underground because of their controlling behaviour.
And that initial response, because it can be shock, it can be grief, it can be all kinds of things, can't it? Anger, especially on the dad's side, I'd imagine. Well, both probably. Yeah. In terms of towards the perpetrator or whatever. Yeah,
so I think that's what I would say to my younger self. The most important thing is that it's not your fault, because I needed to hear that. I didn't believe it, but I needed to hear it over and over and over again.
Yes.
And as far as you asked earlier about, you know, parents, what would they do? I think I'd almost get help. Outside help.
Yeah.
They probably want to bring in the child at some point, but I would want to get help from a counsellor as to how do I parent my child through this? How do I love my child through this? What's the things that I should do or shouldn't do?
Yeah.
So that you don't cause it to go further underground.
That you've mentioned that a couple of times, that undergroundness of the behaviour,
Yeah.
Trying to catch it where it's at and front up, effectively expose it to the light in an appropriate way. Interesting.
Because there's so much shame.
Yes.
Then you have to treat really carefully that you're not reiterating that shame by what you say with your words, but you're enabling that person to actually get rid of it. Yeah.
Interesting. Is there a place in churches for trained counsellors? Like, if you'd had somebody in your church that you knew you could go to, like in the older churches, there was often somebody that was there in that role, and in the army they had a church person that people could go to. At least they had a sounding board that was a safe space. There was nothing at school nobody at school that you could go talk to. Nowadays, schools have counsellors on board, don't they? But back in...
Yeah, so back in my day, which was quite some time ago, 5 years? No, longer. We didn't have a counsellor at church. We didn't have counsellors.
Often it's the role of the pastor or the priest or the layperson who often has no training whatsoever, which can cause issues sometimes, right? It's a whole thing.
Yeah. Yes. But today, I think, I would like to hope that pastors are a lot more wiser and they would seek outside help if they didn't have that training in themselves.
Yeah.
Schools as well are having a lot more counsellors on board now. Most schools have a counsellor available. It used to be in my day that you would just have a careers advisor. And that was all really that was.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was to help the kids that were heading down the trades route or struggling at school. Yeah.
So sadly there wasn't a lot of avenues back in those days for me to find help in.
Is there something that you could say would summarise your life in terms of a theme? Well,
maybe not so much of a theme, but I did get a word from God back in 2014 when we first took on these children that we've adopted. And God said to us when we were finding things difficult that He has given us people that consider themselves worthless coins, but God would give us the skills in which to bring these people about to wholeness. And initially I thought that it was just for those 3 children in our lives at the time. But then 8 years on, God gave us another word and basically said that it's not just, I'm not finished. It's extending out further than just your family. And that's what started the whole training with this counselling degree that I'm wanting to do, so that I could actually become skilled in helping more people bring themselves back around to wholeness. So I guess that sort of like leads me on to my theme of basically wanting to help people come to wholeness where you've seen something broken. I've got, my life is an example of God taking me from brokenness to wholeness, and I would like to see that, in other people as well.
Setting the captives free.
Yeah.
In their minds, in their
That's
hearts,
right.
in their souls, their psyche. Yeah. What a wonderful story. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, David.
I hope you guys have enjoyed this chat today. Would love any comments, or if you would like to get in touch with Sherrilyn at some stage, you can leave a comment and I'll pass that on to her. We hope that this chat has spoken to you, and if it's speaking to your specific situation, we do encourage you to talk to somebody, and that it's not your fault. Take that away from this discussion, and also that there is hope for you, that there is an end to the situation at some stage. It may not be this week, it may not be this month, but God is there in the nitty-gritty as well, and that's an important takeaway. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.